and welcome to the Mindset Michele TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for yet another incredible guest that we're having on the show today. Somebody that the industry and the work that he does, I think is so super important, and I'm sure you'll agree. But first, let's welcome Peter Birch to the show. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Michele. How are you going?
I'm great, thank you. And it is such an honor to have you on the show today. For people that aren't aware of Peter, Peter is the host of Talking Health Tech, a podcast, community group, all sorts of very, very exciting and different areas that he works in, all around this area, and an area that more and more people will become aware of around medical technology, whether it's devices or ethics or policies, which again is a very, very important area for everybody. But there's so many different facets to medical health and technology that I really am fascinated, Peter. I'm sure everybody watching is really going to be interested in how did you come to be working in this area, and what makes you so passionate about the work that you do?
Thank you. Look, great way to start off, and happy to share my experiences. So I've always worked within healthcare and technology in my career of 20 years or so in different roles. I'm not a clinician and I'm not a software developer, but I get along swimmingly with everybody. I've worked with very large organizations, so running corporate emergency assistance programs, bringing travelers back home from overseas or helping when you're traveling. I've run bricks and mortar clinics with practice managers reporting through to me where we're providing travel medicine services, so getting vaccines and medical kits and checks done before you go overseas. And that was my experience then in using different systems, in inverted commas, within the clinic there. Our practice management system consisted of manila folders and bits of paper and those compactus filing cabinets that you can get trapped in if you're not careful. So very familiar with the operations of running a clinic on a day today and running multiple clinics there. I then moved across into more of the startup health tech life with a company called MediRecords in 2016 that makes a cloud-based practice management system for clinics. And that was a role where I was involved in helping the founders build the business. And I've always, so I've been in various roles where I've been the doer, the one that's, the founders say, this is the vision and this is what we need to do. Then someone's got to drive the thing and do the bits and pieces. So I've, built up teams and businesses and become the jack of all trades type person within a startup, particularly in the health tech space, where I'd be hiring people and then being the HR person, doing the sales, doing the marketing, doing the customer success, fixing the Wi-Fi, taking the bins out, all the things that you need to do in a startup. But then I started to get into more industry roles. So on the board of the Medical Software Industry Association, I'm also quite active with the Australasian Institute of Digital Health, and I'm on the New South Wales State Committee there, help growing the community there. While I was doing all of this in healthcare, I was also hosting community radio shows. So I was involved in community radio in like the early 2000s, and I hosted one of Australia's leading underground Australian metal radio shows for about 7 years, which was pretty wild. I did a lot of stuff on FBI radio and doing those overnight shifts. So all these things that were unrelated to my health career, but were a lot of fun. And I enjoyed doing video production and other bits and pieces. But these two kind of worlds kind of came together a couple of years ago in 2017, 2018. I was looking for podcasts to listen to about digital health because I'm in that space, and I'm like, podcasts and these types of conversations, they're a great medium to just, dive in, learn more about a particular topic. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There were a couple in the US and the UK, and but nothing in Australia. And I always found it a really siloed, isolated industry to work in where, health is such a big thing and a big problem to solve, but it feels like sometimes you can just be doing it by yourself and it's hard to find your tribe. So I thought, well, a podcast might be a great way to share some of these conversations I'm having individually with, whether it's other partners as a vendor or with potential customers, and all of that, just sharing those stories. And so I started up this podcast, leveraging all the old experience I had in the radio side. And the podcast was received really well. It had a decent network, brought on some good guests, but I honestly thought it might last for, maybe 20 episodes. I mean, how many episodes could you do on a podcast focusing on health technology, right? But, fast forward to now, nearly 5 years later, it's my full-time thing. We've done 340 something episodes at the time of recording this. We do much more as part of Talking Health Tech, but this whole content and community piece, particularly around healthcare innovation, has been particularly important to me.
Wow, and thank you so much. There's, again, just like I started saying, there's so much in that medical and technology space. There's so much in that background, and I can really hear and was imagining you with some of those really big, I haven't seen them for a few years, but I do remember those really big compactuses that people could get crushed in.
It's dangerous, yeah. Right?
If you were standing in the middle of one of them and somebody at the other end needed a file or something. But yeah, it's funny, like, and one day those things will be in a museum and people will be like, it'll be like the dial telephone. People will be looking at it like, really? You had big paper files and you stuck them in there and they're alphabetical and so on and so forth. But many I've seen, and the last ones I've seen, have actually been used to store stationery and stuff. So yeah, they haven't been used for filing for files for a number of years. But I like how you described all that and gave such a wonderful sense of the operational level background, not as a clinician, not as an allied health person, and not as a tech specialist, but within that industry that you've had such an extensive background, and then obviously cut a lot of your teeth on the hiring, firing, designing organizations for startups, and that's a very fast moving feast of building it as you go, which many people watching would be aware of, all the way through to then working with industries and boards and being on some of those scientific and technology boards that you're a part of today. So what a wonderful and wide background across the industry you have. And I'm sure that this is why the podcast that you thought would go for a couple of episodes is now still going strong 5 years later, and it has evolved to being one of your full-time roles. And I'm sure we'll keep, especially with AI today, keep evolving and growing as this very important focus within Australia as well, because we are quite different to health systems, some of the health systems overseas. Will keep growing and developing. With so much in all of that, and so much in terms of your experience and background and expertise in this space, what about you, the person? What would you say that for you today success means? What does it mean to you, having essentially worked in different areas, gone, oh, I'll try this and it's been successful, I'll try that and it's been successful? What do you define success as for you today?
Sure. Look, that's a really interesting one to unpack, because I guess putting in the context of that background that I gave you, I came into management roles organically, but quite early in my career. So I was back then, a manager in my early 20s, but, working with teams that there was a lot that I did in healthcare, but also in other services too. I was managing teams of nurses who had much more experience in the space than I, and were obviously very good nurses as well. I've managed teams of trade qualified mechanics in a call center before, and I can tell you I am definitely nowhere near a trade qualified mechanic. So there's throughout my career, I've often dealt with that familiar challenge of imposter syndrome, or feeling well above my head in terms of, well above my head in terms of what needed to be done, but pulling on from my own experiences. But I think that's probably where a lot of that, doing things, getting my hands dirty and getting to know things comes from, is trying to build that confidence and demonstrating that capability by doing it firsthand. Another thing that kind of speaks to that too is my journey through doing qualifications for stuff. And if you look at my background just based on qualifications, it kind of doesn't really make much sense. I've got initially experience and qualifications in, I guess, advertising and marketing, but then nothing for a while. And then I did an MBA. But after the MBA, I did a CPA. And so I'm technically a certified practicing accountant. But then I'm also a certified health informatician, and I have a few other random qualifications, and we run a podcast and media company that does a lot of video and audio editing. So there's this bizarre mix of stuff that I'm kind of a walking qualified business in a sense. But that whole journey comes from doing the MBA really early in my career. I went through and really understood the importance of being able to manage a P&L, for example, I struggled early in my career in just understanding the financials and what makes a business tick. And I knew full well that there's obviously important points around culture and people and things, but in the end, if you don't know the numbers, you're going to be, how do you communicate through the business right up to a senior exec level? And so I even did the MBA, and I'm like, you know what? I'm good, but I really don't feel confident in the numbers. And now I'm managing multiple P&Ls as a general manager. How else can I get more confident in, these financials? On reflection, I probably should have just watched a bunch of YouTube videos or maybe got a mentor or something. But instead, I decided to become a certified practicing accountant, because then no one can say I don't know this stuff if I've got a CPA. And I don't recommend that journey for many people, because that was probably a big, like the CPA is wonderful, and you should do that if that's your kind of pathway to being an accountant, and do those qualifications for those reasons. And there's an element of doing qualifications for, giving yourself that confidence. And the same with the MBA. People still ask me, should I do an MBA? And it kind of like, it depends. Part of it is just getting the bit of paper and having that thing to tick a box. And so I think of that a lot with qualifications. I probably place more weight on experience as a better qualification for doing something. So when I think about your question around what success is, it's showing results and setting your mind to something and doing the thing. I'm a big advocate for, yes, you need a vision, and yes, you need to talk about what things might need to look like. But in the end, I'm just about getting stuff done. So I think that's, a really important thing that's driven me throughout my pathway. And that probably comes from that early stage of needing that confidence and, being able to demonstrate what I thought was to other people that I knew what I was doing. But in the end, I think it was about actually justifying to myself. So I would hope to think that, and it's not that and I'm still working on this on a day-to-day now. So, but what I do strive for, at least in terms of success, is being able to reflect on some of those successes that I've had in the past and that are demonstrable and we can look at in terms of the business and all the other bits and pieces, reflecting on that and going, well, you know what? Because I still get imposter syndrome on a daily basis right now. And that's just life, I think. So being able to acknowledge that and then go, okay, in spite of that, let's get on and work out what needs to be done. That's what I think drives a lot of success in setting that goal and just doing the thing.
Wow. And again, I'm so impressed with the depth and the breadth of your responses and your answers to these questions, because success, I can see and I can hear, is again something that is quite a profound and quite wide definition for you in terms of, reflecting on your journey and that sense of imposter syndrome and the managing teams of nurses and mechanics from a younger age, and that sense of, well, I'm doing it, but they're the experts at their specialities. I'm becoming the expert at leading teams and leading people to get things done. So throughout what you were describing, I wasn't surprised when you kind of encapsulated it into, it's about getting things done and showing those practical results. That's what success means to you, because in a sense, whether it's been completing an MBA or a CPA or whatever you've set your mind to, and these are all really in depth and very practical but very deep specialities to then go and learn and work in. It takes a long time and a lot of exams to get your CPA. So these
I should have looked that up at the start, shouldn't I? But that was, but to your point, that's very true. I do resonate with that point around, if there's something that I want to do, I'm going to work out how to do it. So, but then that it's just having that, it's not just having it, it's about having that consistent, resilient kind of focus on all of this noise, all these things are happening, but in like, this is what's that thing that you're striving for. And I can see how that can be a pro and a con, because that can be, you know, for every one thing you say yes to, you're saying no to something else, and all those types of things that I still struggle with on a day-to-day as well. But yeah, setting my mind to something and just no matter what, getting that thing done has kind of been how I've operated on day-to-day.
Yeah, and it's people like yourself that I've come across, what I would call a high achiever. You know, somebody that says, I'm going to go do this, and does it, and builds up a career and a life path of success. And that's why it's so wonderful to have people like yourself on the show, because you've built these habits, you've built these practices and habits, whether it's, you know, deciding to do something and then going and doing it and seeing it through to the end, whatever the end may be and however long it may take. But it's also that it's that partly it's that funny thing where, as a younger person, sometimes placed into more senior and serious roles, that sense of imposter syndrome, which, like you quite rightly pointed out, never really leaves you. But what it does is, in a strange way, it then motivates and keeps motivating people to keep studying and learning and growing throughout their career. And because of that, as you then go through your career and become on boards, and then you want to be chair of the board, and you want to this and you want to that, so you go and study everything to do with boards, and you go and study everything to do with that industry, etc. So it's what we're showing and what we're talking about is some of those habits that can be built in whatever person's life path it is when they're younger, and then can be expanded on as you become more aware of what they are as you get older.
Yeah. And if I could share too, like on that, you know, your reflection just made me think about another thing that I think of often, which is, I think quite early in my career, I looked at progression was, you know, promotions, climbing that corporate ladder, getting those qualifications, adding the post-nominals to the end of your name. And, you know, and then you're going to make it. And if you get to that point, then you've done it. But then when you get the qualification, or you get the promotion, or you get you know, you can celebrate the thing, but you're kind of like, well, all right, now that's good. What next? And so I'm kind of at that point now already. Like I'm, you know, and I've still got plenty of years left. I'm speaking like I'm an old wise relic, aren't I? But I'm far from that. But I feel like these days it's not about, we're talking health tech, for example, it's not about building a company that's going to 10x in 5 years and it's going to have this remarkable reach of billions of people listening to the podcast and all that kind of stuff. I'm a big advocate for, at the moment, having resonance instead of reach. So finding that key message and honing in on it and having clarity and speaking to those key people. This is what I love about platforms these days, like podcasts and communities, that you can niche down, speak to people and resonate with, you know, your tribe, how big or small it is. It doesn't matter that you don't have the millions and millions of followers that don't value that kind of quick snackable content. If you've got quality stuff that you can share, I think that's what's driving me at the moment, is creating something that has meaning and impact rather than just scale.
Yeah, and I think that's a wonderful segue, because that's part of, I think we've already moved on to the part of the show where we start to talk about the tips and the suggestions. And I love how you're reflecting there a number of things. One is the external or the extrinsic, you know, kind of motivation, which is very normal. We kind of condition throughout school that we want to get 10 out of 10. And so when you finish school, whether it's at high school or university age, you're still looking for that 10 out of 10, which translates into, I want to be head of this company, head of this department, head of whatever. And then slowly you realize, well, it's not so much the extrinsic, it's the intrinsic, or inside you. What is it that gives you meaning and what gives you satisfaction and direction in life? And the more that you look for that, you so beautifully translated that into the business sense, which is about the resonance and reach of your niche. What area is your tribe? Where are your people? And what kind of work or business can you have in that niche that will actually mean that you're around other people talking about the things that you're interested in, working on the things that you're interested in, and creating more of that match between what's external to you in terms of your meaning and your niche, and what's internal to you, which is what gives you joy in terms of your habits. Peter, with so much success in so many different areas, I'm really interested as well in when people are watching the show and they might look at you and go, well, it's easy for him because he has, so much motivation, so much get up and go, and had early success that kind of reinforced that motivation and get up and go. What sort of suggestions would you give to people that might be struggling a little bit more to kind of find that, niche or find that get up and go? What do you think was one of the key things that helped you to keep going when obviously everybody has their ups and downs, but what helped you to keep going?
Sure. Look, if 20 something years ago I said to you, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work through as in big corporate land for a while and then move to the startup world and then become an authoritative voice in digital health and health tech with a podcast network and a community. I had no idea that was going to be the pathway. Even 3 years ago, I did so Talking Health Tech became my full-time thing 2 years ago. When I started the podcast, I remember seeing a note that I wrote for myself, and I started a Slack group basically right from the very start in terms of, and I created a good vibes channel, as in thinking about your wins, which actually comes to one of my recommendations to people. But I had a channel within the Slack group, which is, just put any wins in there. And then when things get a bit difficult, as they do in any life, whether you're in startup life or in a well-established business, there's going to be good days and not good days. I remember seeing a note that, and I only looked at it a couple of weeks ago when I started the podcast. My goal was to I think do the podcast to be more of an authoritative voice, to be hopefully more employable within my space, and hopefully command a salary that I deserve or something like that. That was the kind of wording that I'd made then. And that was the bar. And then it was just the podcast, just the audio podcast. I definitely didn't want to do video, and I hated speaking in to video. I did plenty of radio stuff, and I was so used to looking down and reading notes and not looking at a camera and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know much about digital marketing. I'd done, when I did my marketing stuff, all of the SEO and all of that stuff didn't really exist then. So, and I didn't think I was going to, but it just progressively became okay, we're doing these audio recordings. Well, maybe we should be putting them somewhere. I'm going to learn a bit more about websites. And then while I'm doing websites, what's this SEO thing? And I little bits here. So, and then it continued to build and build and build, and which is now podcasts and video, and then the podcast network. So in terms of what this thing's going to look like in 5 years' time, who knows? I kind of feel like it's a little bit like driving, on a really dark road with headlights on. You know what you're doing about this far ahead, and you're on a road. You're going to go somewhere. Hopefully, you don't drive off a cliff, but at least you've got the lights on to see a little bit further ahead. And so that's kind of how it feels a little bit what I'm doing at the moment. But maybe I can see there's some kind of distant lights there that I'm roughly going towards. So my advice to people who might find it a struggle to either get started or have progress, it's sometimes the same advice I give to my kids at the moment when they go to clean their room, and they're like, I can't do it because there's just too much stuff. And it's just pick something up and put that one thing away and then come back to it. And then maybe put it in groups and do those and just focus on these things. So I think, and I try and do that too, because I get overwhelmed a lot. And I think, well, you get to the point of overwhelm and then you end up doing nothing, even though you've got so much stuff to do. So I think just starting with one thing and focusing on that and trying to do that.
Yeah, and I love you bringing, again, so many fabulous examples to kind of reinforce and reflect on the skills and the habits aren't just applicable in a boardroom or a big corporate, but also with startups and also as a parent. And, those same elements work whether you're talking to, a colleague that's having trouble getting started or motivated because they're overwhelmed and saying exactly the same thing. Start off with one thing, pick one thing, and then start to group those one things and then keep going and keep going. And I think that's, a really important piece of advice. And Peter, quickly, If people were wanting to get hold of you after the show, what's the best way of connecting with you?
Sure thing. Probably easiest on LinkedIn. I'm pretty good on the DMs. They get a bit busy, but I try and get back to everyone. So please feel free to follow or connect and send me a note. Let us know that you heard the conversation. Always happy to connect for a chat. I'm based in Sydney and always good for a coffee with schedules allow as well.
Wonderful. How generous. And my final question, and you kind of alluded to different elements earlier, and everything from, not realizing how long a CPA might take and those sorts of things. But if you were to give your younger self some advice, what might that advice be?
I think that that advice around reiterating some of those points that we've discussed before, that you don't need permission to do something. I think the advice that other people also often have no idea what's going on either, so it's okay. And a lot of people are kind of just making it up as they go. And like, so you look to people who strive with confidence, like they've probably because they've done something that can give them that confidence, but a lot of that might only be 20% of the way. The rest of it is the how they carry themselves and what they do. So trust in yourself. That, I don't know about fake it till you make it. That sounds a bit of a weird one, but it's the have a go. I think that's the, in the end. And I'm grateful for the pathway that I've done. So I'm not saying I would have liked to have done anything any earlier or any differently, but if that's helpful, particularly for people coming up early in their career, because would I suggest to someone in their early 20s, that they should go to work with a cap and earrings on and start a podcast? And there's maybe not. Like that's work, because that's something I did after, demonstrating that I've, done these things within businesses and got those runs on the board, so to speak. So I'm a big advocate for demonstrated by doing, like show people what you can do by showing them, not just talking about it, and then try and share that with as many people as possible to compound and do things at scale and hopefully have a meaningful impact on the world.
Wonderful. What an amazing, fabulous message. Try and do what you want to do and keep that, impact on the world. But again, summed up, I think, so beautifully in what you were saying about trusting in yourself, and that, what if somebody, especially if you're younger, they may look more confident and be more confident in certain ways, but they don't necessarily have all of those answers, and to trust your own intuition and to just give it a go, give things a go. It's such a wonderful, wonderful messages from today. And Peter, it's been such an honor and a privilege to have you on the show.
Thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate it.
And to all the viewers, it's been another incredible show where we've had some really wonderful insights from the fabulous Peter. And we love so much hearing all of the different messages and notes from you about how much you appreciate all of the different insights each show. But for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.